Welcome to the Tug of Heart podcast on Strong Island Radio. This is the place where we dig deep into the heart to rise in love. So let's join good friends Lori and Marianne as they discuss understanding and living from the heart.
So today we're talking about this idea of possibilities. And I have to say, Lori, on my drive here, which is, it's a pretty concrete drive along Sunrise Highway, I started to notice just the trees blossoming. And I was feeling such a wave of like true heart movement. Like I just wanted to cry because the question came to me is, how is this possible? These beautiful, tiny pink and white blossoms. Like what? Last week you weren't here and now you're here. And it just like sat in my heart as the tender mercies. Like this is the tender mercy of the heart. Like it was such a beautiful gift. And then along with them are all the tulips. Yes. Right? Like the tulips that are cosmetically planted on these corners, and they stand there like so proudly, just doing what they do naturally.
Just be fabulous. That's what I say. That's what we're here. I don't know how to explain myself. If people say, what do you do? Like when I volunteered at your school, I'm like, oh, Marianne didn't tell you my job is just be fabulous.
Yes. And now what we could say is just stand there like a tulip. Like just stand there like a tulip, so natural and right there in their beauty and embracing that even if I am on a street corner, I am here to do a good job. And so to me, I just felt very inspired and nature does that for me. It really allows me to find the metaphor for possibility.
Absolutely. What we say all the time is just that the natural pointing to the supernatural. Mm-hmm. And by saying that, we're talking about understanding the true nature of the nature outside of us in part, which means there's all this beauty, there's all this wonderfulness, fabulousness, as I said, going mm-hmm. on. But there's also this inner state of mind happening, can be in conjunction, but it's also a much more personal thing than even the tulips, and a much more beautiful and intimate thing. And what happens is at some point, no matter how beautiful, how magnificent everything around us is and can be, we always have to give rise to that question, which is what you asked. How can this be? Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to ask it. One is curiosity, which opens a lot of possibility. Mm-hmm. The other is skepticism, which is limiting. Mm-hmm. Now, for possibility, there's always a possibility of devastation. But yes. For our purposes today, we're talking about heart possibility forward. Okay, yes. Futuristic projection, manifestation, which is all this energy ahead. So we're more interested in that, curious, how can this be?
Mhm.
And then from that, it goes to how can I make this be? And I had mentioned in my quick intro, just bridging how something can be, and then there's the means it happens, which is a whole other topic. But for now, being able to know what is possible. And by that, we mean possible beyond our limits of thinking, because we tend to, if we're not comfortable in kind of dancing with possibility, we end up operating from our extreme thoughts that occur
Yes.
habitually.
Yes.
And that's a little bit manic, for
Mm.
lack of a better word,
Mm.
or
Obsessive.
depressive. Yeah, it's
Ruminating.
not it's not the sanest option for life. Now, we had come up with the idea of possibility because in the last talk, I had marked mentally that you had mentioned this is, I don't have a context around it, but basically you had said, we need to grow within our heart and our ideas.
Mm.
To do this, we must be willing to grow into more evolved ways of understanding. So I stayed thinking about this, like how we can develop a greater understanding about our world and ourself.
Mm.
And then that led me to thinking that to approach this, we are talking about believing on a certain level, there is a version of us that could be more developed. There is a version of the world that can be better,
Yes.
right? More mature, and just somehow more than the self and the world that we are currently operating within.
Mhm.
So by listening to what you said and just taking that in, I was thinking, so what Marianne's talking about when she says we need to grow, you're already envisioning something
Yes.
that you don't yet have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's this imagination happening. And if it was something that already existed, you would say, well, we need to teach the people that don't have it how to have it.
Mm-mm.
Because you would be assuming it's been attained, it's no longer a possibility, you got it. And there's us and them that have it and don't. So you're talking about first imagination, which is one of the origins of possibility, or probably the origin of possibility. So we take a step back to imagination. And in terms of what it means in the heart, I would say it's like the eye of the heart.
Oh.
And it's one of
I
the
love that
it's one
image.
of the thrones within the heart. The seat of the heart being love, of course, but then there's these thrones. Okay, we love, with the visuals, but there's these thrones. And when I say thrones, it's not the seat of the heart, the seat of imagination, but that imagination is one of the thrones within the heart because it reigns if we allow it to properly.
Mhm.
This is proper order, proper nature of things,
Mhm.
and kind of understanding that. And so the possibility for all possibilities just arises from this imagination, and it's the source of the art, the music, progression, anything that we would consider just vital to our existence, in the sense that our existence somehow not only implies but demands within our nature, we progress into more and then ever more and then ever more.
Mhm.
So as you were talking about that, you're talking about striving for something. So a part of you has used the eye of your heart, okay, which sits on this throne, and we call it imagination, at least for this discussion. And you were able to see that.
Definitely. And because what's so, I think, so important in the shifting of beliefs, right, that you were also talking about is part of, I think, why I was able and am able to see that is because I see myself as part of the wholeness of humanity
That's
right
right.
now.
Hmm.
I am in the circle of humanity, um and being in that, the we is very critical in that we all need to begin this process of envisioning a more humane way of being humans. And one of the questions that you ask that I love is that when living a more heart-led life, right, we're striving for possibilities of good, of
Right.
creating goodness, truth, beauty, those ideals. And in the process of envisioning and creating that, your question that you ask is, okay, can I do better? Can we do better? And I think there's a resounding, yeah, we can do better.
Right.
Humans, we can do better. And now, how do we begin to start to create that possibility?
Right. Which is where I had
'Cause it's
mentioned
complicated,
it's not easy, but
not easy.
but it's we can say confidently from our own experience of mostly failure
Yes.
at living the heart-led life, because I've said we've between the two of us we've done this ages, okay?
Mhm.
And I was thinking actually on the way, if I had the chance, the opportunity to choose two candidates for the heart-led life, would I choose, all things being equal as far as their intentions, okay?
Yes.
Would I choose, not and this is choose as a guide. Would I choose the one who doesn't have a lot of failure or the one that has a lot of failure?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, when we're talking about possibility and somebody teaching it, I'd go with the one with more failures, assuming that their intentions are the same. So the failures aren't by some habitual
Mhm.
thing tripping them up or anything like that. Okay,
Right,
we're
that
not
kind of
adding any
sabotaging. Mm-mm.
prejudice to it, but the benefit of the doubt for both. And that's because they would likely maybe have less distractions, and a more clear view of what is possible. And that is what experience does teach us, that the more true knowledge and interaction, which we talked about last time, this interest where we integrate into ourselves what's happening outside ourselves, and a genuine interest in not situations,
Mm.
but humanity.
Yes.
People act like, for lack of a better word, assholes
Mm.
situationally,
Mhm.
but there's a deeper humanity there. So if we look past the situation and instead say, I wonder, this curiosity, it opens up understanding, which anchors them to our heart. And that's how we're more able to see the possibilities in them. And we're also able to kind of shape what direction possibility doesn't go. So even though possibility can seem loose, is so many directions, for our purposes here, we're not talking about could be not.
Mhm.
That, and we're not talking about statistics, likelihood.
Mm-mm.
We are talking about possibility. And so hope is not out of this equation, where possibility leads to hope. Hope is necessary because it precedes any real, I guess, change in reality, I would say.
Mhm.
And it's also beyond knowing. So every time
True.
we see a possibility and somehow kind of fulfill it, we've transcended the previous possibility. But this, we talked about this on the math show. You were talking about sacred geometry.
Yes.
And how we were talking about like just how math is everything. This is a whole other topic, but we had said when you arrive at
beautiful.
any answer in science or math, what you have is your next premise.
Yes.
Remember that? This is years ago.
Yes.
But there's this overlap in all things. And that's where we're saying that there's the outside world, but when we're talking about possibility, the one thing that is at the same time, I think, possibility, but still kind of actuality, is that we, with time, more firmly realize that the possibilities of change, personal change within the heart, cannot be found in the
Mhm.
outside world. But the outside world very generously points to the way.
Mhm.
So external things cannot do that. So back to what you were saying about experiencing possibility and how grand it can be and everything else, and how it's just the beginning, and where do we go from here? Well, let's start with accepting, if you would join me in agreeing with this, that we accept and agree that possibility is at minimum the beginning of healing.
I could completely agree with that. Yes.
Okay. So next is, okay, we see that there's a possibility for healing, and the possibility is at the same time the possibility to healing. So then we go to the solution. And this is where I had, at the 11th hour mentioned to you, it popped into my head, your son does this, and you do this. You do this for a living and for living.
Yes.
And
I love that.
I've always said Sage is so much like you
In a lot
in
of
my
ways.
limited experience, yes,
Yes.
with him. And part of it, I kind of got to thinking, well, that's why what I see in him that I see in you is that you guys both like to make things better in a
Mm.
concrete way, and in a way that you can look and say, it was like this, now it's like this, and now even better.
Mhm.
So I don't know, I didn't even get a
I
chance to
thought that
prepare
was
you,
it's
but
true,
can you
but I
talk
think
to us
it's a
about his
beautiful
job?
connection, right? So Sage is an engineer, an
Right.
industrial engineer. So part of being that kind of engineer, he's really creating systems for workflow to happen, right? For workflow to move more smoothly, more
Which implies
easily.
opening the flow, right?
This sense of flow. He is also very creative, and he actually went to a program at Lehigh University that they developed for engineers, and it's an integration of engineering and the arts. Because this, and I think this is connected to what we're talking about today, because possibility is a very creative process.
Mhm.
And why is it creative? Because the arts and creative thinking can hold complexities. And to hold complexities, to hold opposites, to hold the dissonance of not being at the solution yet is very difficult and very hard, like you were saying. And one of the things that I'm really learning from Sage is when he talks to me about his job, I don't understand it technically because he's doing a lot of computer kinds of things. But he does get that it gets harder before it gets easier.
Yes.
There is a piece of the process where you are taking a risk towards this hunch you have towards what can actually make a possibility begin to happen. But the key is to stay the course.
And they actually systematically
Take it piece by piece.
attempt these things, right? Before
Absolutely.
they
And Sage gets anxious before he's about to introduce a new system that he has in place. He's like, "Oh, I'm really praying this works." So even though he has done the very technical work of getting this new system in place, there is still an element of faith that is infused in it because there's an intuition that goes
absolutely,
with this.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
and from time to time, he'll say to me, I built a new tool at work this week. And I kind of love this because I'm thinking for us with the heart, like I love that you brought him in because he's also, so dear to my heart. Like it's our little toolbox. Like what if the throne of possibility beside it has this little toolbox?
Oh, you know me with tools.
Yes.
Marianne, I get excited. I
And
like
you
a good
just
tool.
kind of open it up and you're like,
Yes.
oh, this is, we've built a new tool to help us get there. So the ultimate goal, and I think this is where it's connected to healing, is this pathway that we're trying to build, right, toward possibility, toward healing, is with the intention to ease suffering. But in order to get there, you will suffer.
Yes. And I want to maybe expand on that, because I think what you're saying is spot on. To ease suffering. The only thing that I would add is part of that is in understanding suffering itself, which I'm not saying that I completely do, but from my own experience, I can't say recent, but a little bit further historically experience, because I'm not ready to talk about recent suffering. A big part of easing suffering is not minimizing the pain and minimizing damage.
Oh,
To me, one of the greatest
definitely.
parts of lessening suffering is that it is just finding some way to make it meaningful.
Mhm.
Because when you have suffering and no meaning attached to
Absolutely.
it, it's chaos. And I've said this so many times, life is drudgery if
Yes.
what we do does not have meaning.
Mm.
And our suffering can be drudgery. And to me, this defines hell. But now there can be pain with meaning and purposefulness. Okay. And that's what we were talking about, where you have this idea of an end that you don't
Mhm.
lose sight of, even as what you're feeling seems contrary to that.
Yes.
And that's what you were talking about. I noticed this so much with you lately, where you, I don't even know the words for it. You have the language where you talk about holding almost two things that would be what I say, the dichotomies.
Mhm.
But for me, they mean where one exists, the other's not welcome. But you have been developing this thought process. And I'm going to also add this about possibility. One of the things I've learned from you is that where we are limited by our thinking, and when we haven't broken uh free of our memories and our limited thinking and our own history and stuff, I have learned with you in the most beautiful, unexpected way. And I still, out of habit, begrudge it at the same time. No, I'm trying to be like as honest as I can, because I want to give you my heart answer about this. But even though I'm uncomfortable and I don't like this feeling of kind of surrendering to it, it does exist that there is this possibility when we ourselves are limited by our thinking, our memories, our whatever holds us, okay?
Mhm.
That there's this new availability to us, which is almost like a vicarious possibility. And I experience a lot of possibilities vicariously to you that flat out left my own, I'm just not open to, Marianne, and I have no interest in being open to,
And
period.
I think that is a key point to the actual nurturance and growth of possibility,
Yes.
which is we need to do it together.
Yeah, and I
There
trust
is a
you. I don't
togetherness.
trust all these wild ideas. No
No,
offense.
and it's
But I
very
trust Marianne
well.
at the core, which is I trust your heart.
Yes.
And sometimes that has to be enough when my limited thinking can't find or see a way, right?
Well, and look, when we started this podcast, you said to me, this would not be possible for me without you.
Right.
And I like gave you a piece of myself, right, in the joining of this podcast without an expectation of anything in return, because I knew we were both participating in this mystery walk, because we didn't know how it would unfold, but we knew
Right.
the intention and the possibility of understanding more deeply the heart was there. And because of that, there was this bigger view that came into the picture that created an inner aliveness and energy in the face of what brought us together is death, of grief. And I think that goes back to this search for meaning.
Yeah.
Like together, maybe we could make sense of this brutal year we have been through.
Right.
And that is continuing to like grow, and the aliveness of it is here. It's
Right.
with me.
I love-
it's in my heart.
I absolutely love this because I think your initial thing that you pointed out was the question of, can there be better?
Yes.
But prior to like a heart-driven possibility, vision of possibility through the eye of the heart, the imagination, we would ask, is there more? Which is different,
Ah.
right? That's a very secular searching of accumulation outside of us, kind of.
I love that distinction.
Yeah, which brings me to my next point, which is where we're talking about like this vicarious experience of possibility. I never want to exaggerate our similarities or differences. I try to keep it balanced, but I try to be honest because
Yes.
so that people can understand who is here at this table
Oh,
talking.
that is great.
One of the things that did happen when we were beginning to enter into the talks is there came a time when I was like, what do you see here, Marianne? I'm going for it. I'm going to keep growing, and I'm going to lend my energy to this in honor of my son.
Yes.
And in your honesty, you had said, I'm right there, but you need to understand, I'm comfortable going all over the place.
Yes.
And
yes.
and I'm just not. So, but we have a loyalty to that intention and keeping it pure.
Mhm.
And we have a respect, a really healthy respect that has been developed with ups and downs,
Yes.
and commitment to the heart through each.
Yes.
And so where I trust you to go all over the place, you also trust me to limit a lot. And that's the beauty of humanity, Marianne, because I can't express enough to people that we're very distinct people from one another, but we're also so much alike. And what makes us the same is the heart, which is our premise for humanity. But if you would take the heart out of it, I'm not sure how much, what would we base it on? Just overlap? That's not possibility. That's what is. And we're measuring what is when we have already said there can be better. So why compare? If there could be better, we're in the less and the worse. Why would we compare notes at the worst?
Yeah, we've got to put the heart back in it.
Right, because then we're open to better, which is an extension of each of us that exists in this realm that we are creating, even though we haven't yet fully seen the parameters or stepped into it.
Yes, and I think there has been a deadening of the heart of humanity.
Yes.
Like maybe it's just scarred over, right? Or just not beating with that same level of aliveness that can find the sacred reciprocity, that give
love
and
that.
take. Whatever I am giving to you, you are giving back to me. And together we are being able to generate the stamina, right? To create, to engineer even.
I love that.
To
Yes.
engineer
Yes.
a new possibility of seeing through the eye of the heart.
Yes. And I think the natural step from possibility is, of course, hope. And when you do that, hope changes with like our prevailing knowledge and understanding of the world and one another. But if we get locked into seeing the human condition as unchangeable, then that hope is it's based on irrational uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that hope also has a very like ambivalent effect on humanity. We can't predict. Our hope is not rooted in something solid and true. It's I guess, for lack of a better word, superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same as these extreme thoughts. where you get this extreme thing. Well, I've always thought this, and you expect something to repeat itself only because it has. Now that's superstition. And what we're talking about here is innovation, if you want to use like just the engineering term, which means a detachment from what has previously been done, because we're now talking about more.
And very thoughtful action,
Right.
right? So this hope isn't necessarily attached to action. It's attached to the wish, the want, the desire, but
And
possibility.
it lends itself to the motivation or action.
Yes. But once we're in the realm of creating, right,
Mhm.
of actually taking steps towards, then we start this building of the possibility. And at that point, it starts to become part of our reality. And it is really, I think the other piece is, like you said, about being able to understand and fully embody the pain, right, of our own suffering. We have to begin to tolerate that this is it's a long road. This is not a quick fix, what we're talking about. It's a
you're right.
devotion.
Mhm.
It's a dedication. And and it's worth it. And it's worth it.
And it's that's something I've always told my kids, because they're on the spectrum, like I am. And so one of the things is, and I think this is for everybody, not just for people on the spectrum, but it was, I only had my point of reference to share with them. But that when you're younger, that real just discomfort and that longing, that undefinable longing and discomfort that you have, and squirminess. I don't even know how to, just the awkwardness of the whole thing. Anytime we try to make a little progress, it's
right. Talk about embodiment.
It's that wiggly feeling of taking every step on loose soil, and it's precariousness because you've never done it before. And I would tell them, you just keep taking those steps. And here's the thing, life will, if you're growing, life will always make sure those feel precarious. Just when you think you've gotten stronger and topped your game and everything, something more unique will happen that pushes you into that, because that's how growth happens.
So that's something to celebrate, right? So for our listeners, if you are feeling uncomfortable, right, as you're growing towards goodness, as you're growing towards being better, you're in a great spot.
Exactly.
You're in a great spot.
I told you I recently started doing art. I've not announced it, but now I'm saying it.
Love it.
And one of the things that I do, and I've kind of realized, oh my gosh, somewhere along the way, I must have adopted this habit. Just to make a fair assessment, I've progressed pretty quickly. Okay. Now, having said that, the reason I think I have, when I've thought about it, is people will say, oh, you must have been feeling this to draw this, or maybe you liked this. None of that. I only draw what I don't want to draw, what makes me really uncomfortable approaching, because I don't know how I would approach it. And I think part of it is because I can see very quickly, just through life experience, like, I have no idea how I would do this, and I want to push it aside. I'm like, then I'm actually going to do this, because that means I have something to work out with this.
So it's an exercise. And I kind of love that too, as a task to say, okay, what's something that I'm not so comfortable with? Riding a bike through town. Oh, I don't like that. I don't like riding a bike through. That would be a good exercise to practice.
I do it with people. I've told you this.
Uncomfortable.
If I'm uncomfortable somewhere, I assume there's something in me that needs sorting out, and I kind of will step into it. Now, not that I'm like I've perfected this, because again, that there's so much uncomfortableness in my life. What does that tell you about me? Also, that there's so much work to be done. But I would tell my kids, so that awkwardness and that precariousness always exists. You don't ever get
fully comfortable.
You'll never get comfortable, and you'll never get you'll never get so good at this living thing that you remove discomfort. But what you will get is good at operating in discomfort and good at not letting that guide where you go and don't go. And you do get good at being uncomfortable.
Yes,
I think that's the most success I've had in life, is that
I
I'm
think
as awkward
that's
as ever, but
beautiful.
I'm really good at being awkward now.
because you're encouraged based on your life history that the discomfort will transform. It will move. You will see a difference. You will be fully active and present in a process of growth. And, as things get more complicated and had been more complicated in my life, going simple is the other side of that, which is to start to get comfortable in the simplest of routines, right? We were challenged
that's
this
very
year.
difficult.
And that's also difficult. Can I just live in simplicity and be with that? Because simple and complicated, right? They're the two that work together to come up with a sustainable possibility.
That's
Something
Marianne.
that can. You think so? It just came out.
I'm like my wheels are turning faster than I oiled them for right now. I'm like,
Lori, let's end.
whoa, because I'm not one that that's amazing.
Right?
Yeah,
And
no, it is
has
right.
to be
But
simple
see, this is
enough
what
for
I'm
us
saying
to
with you with
sustain it.
these two polars.
Inspired. Yes, I'm playing with Sacred Third.
I do know that you keep going with this.
Yes, because there's the
And
third.
again, I don't like it, but I like you.
And I like you,
Which
Lori.
is, and I was thinking this, actually, you and Maddie were talking about art last time. I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yes.
You guys were talking about how we could both see an art and one of us loves it and one doesn't. And I remembered an old, actually, fiance I had. And when I was picturing you guys saying, we can see art. Why can we have such different opinions of art? And kind of work through it. What's different between that and life?
Yes.
And I was like, I kind of didn't like him when he didn't like my art. But then I do remember one of the sweetest things was he did tell me at the time, he's like, don't be upset. I love you. I just don't love that art. But he explored it and the gallery and whatever. And it's the same, I think, with you, where there's this openness to let me see this expression you're into because I do love you.
Yes. Yes. And love truly does inspire growth. Like I have grown the most from my children. Mm-hmm. Because they will kind of push back on my old ideas. And instead of being defensive, I'm like, oh, okay, I love you. I know you love me. So teach me. Let's learn. I'm open. And then, I come back to whatever central place that is ultimately me, but it does inspire an interest in what the other person is interested in.
That is right. And speaking of uncomfortableness, our next talk right from this is just kind of how to know if you are being open to possibility or limited. And a lot of that has to do with squirminess is a good measure.
Yes.
Anyways,
Very good.
We're about past time, right?
Yes, we certainly are.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And stay open to possibility as a practice. And as if it's a new thing, more power to you also, because fresh eyes in anything is amazing. There's a certain potency if people are not used to being open to possibilities, that their world's going to have this woo burst.
Right.
So I envy them. So go for it. You can like and share our podcast. You can like Strong Island Radio. You can like Bobby. We like Bobby. Hi, Bobby. We always say hi to Bobby.
Yes, our producer.
And until next time, take care of each other, listen to your heart, and farewell.
Farewell.